Cool. All right, so we're going to talk about Devise, specifically OAuth. So there's, like anything else that you'll find, there's 120 ways to do OAuth. We're going to do it talking about Devise. If you don't want to use Devise, there's plenty of documentation out there on how to do it in a different way. The reason why I'm doing it this way is because one of the hard things is that Devise does abstract so much that a lot of the documentation for doing OAuth doesn't apply, because it'll tell you to change certain things in like your sessions controller or something like that, which you don't have access to if you're using Devise. And then if you're like me and you break your project twice trying to figure it out, and you generate those controllers like she was talking about don't do, and you break all the things, you get really frustrated. You're just like, why is this not working? But keep in mind, if you're not wanting to use Devise, that's fine too. You don't have to for your project. Devise and behind the scenes is just Ruby. That's all it is. Every single thing that Devise does, you can just program yourself. Most gyms are that way. In fact, all gyms are that way, basically. It's they're all Ruby. They're all things that you could have done. But there's a saying that you'll hear a lot: why reinvent the wheel? If you can find a gym to do something that you want to do, why spend 2 hours writing the code out yourself when you can spend 30 seconds installing a gym? So you can do user authorization without it, but it has it built in. So we're going to use that. So I'm going to share my screen. And we'll get started. Cool. Everybody can see that? Cool. All right. So I haven't even started up a program. Like, we're going to go straight from top to bottom. So some of this stuff you just covered. Like, so some of this stuff is going to be like super refresher because literally she just covered it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our Rails application, right? So we're just going to go in, and you've probably already messed around with Rails new, right? So you're going to do Rails new, and we're going to call this OAuth study. Now I don't want all that test stuff, so I'm going to get rid of the test stuff. This is what I was talking about with Postgres. Your Rails app comes with MySQL. Postgres is a stronger database. It's a lot more built-in stuff. It's not even necessarily needed for what we're doing right now. It's beyond the scope of what we're doing. But for your projects, it comes in really handy. There's some things that MySQL just can't do. So to do that, so that's what the flag is. It's telling me, okay, I want to do my own database. Don't give me what's included. And we're going to do PostgreSQL. And the capital T, that just says generate my Rails app without any tests. Don't put any of the test files in there. We'll let this run. Mine will run a little quicker than hers because I don't have any of the tests going. I don't have anything happening. So while it's running, is what kind of projects are y'all wanting to build with Rails? What's some of the stuff y'all thinking about? Anybody? Don't be shy. I did mine on Harry Potter. I made like a newsletter.
I would share, but I haven't thought of anything.
I broke my project, like I said, twice. So eventually I just threw together one real quick on Harry Potter. So, okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and set up Devise. So let's go ahead and CD into this. And we'll bring up my editor. Everything's on different screens here. All right, so the first thing, like we just covered in the earlier study group, we're going to go into the gem file and we're going to set up Devise. So we're going to use the gem Devise. We're going to go ahead and add a couple other gems. In the scope of what we're doing today, they probably won't be necessary. But if you're going to use this for like a full running app, you may want to go ahead and add these gems. So we're going to do Ruby parser and Nokogiri. Now, I'm sure you've all used Nokogiri, if you remember that. So what's happening here, and if you look up other walkthroughs, you might see a lot of them, instead of Nokogiri, have this one. It's another version of Nokogiri that's now deprecated. So it doesn't work anymore. Like, it'll let you install it. It still exists on GitHub and everything, but they're not touching it anymore. There's a big paragraph on like they're not going to do it anymore. So Nokogiri is the next best thing for this. All this does is for like in the future, some of the like really crazy cool stuff that you can do with OAuth customizations, this will help aid that along. It'll give you certain methods that'll help aid that. All right, so we're going to install that. So a little tip, if you guys haven't done it, I always like to check when I install something to make sure that it gets installed. Now you can go to your gem file lock and you can look through all this if you want. It's not very readable. And you can try to look through this, but again, it's really hard to narrow down what you just installed. So if you do bundle list, it'll reorganize what it just did in alphabetical order. So you can go in and go like, okay, Nokogiri installed, and you can come up here. It's easier to find Devise is installed. So bundle list will just reorganize everything in alphabetical order. All right, so now, once we get those gems installed, once you have Devise, you're gonna need to install that. And to do that, you're gonna do Rails generate Devise install. Oops, if I could spell Devise install. We'll let that install. All right. So now we have Devise. And if you go in and look on your gem lock, you'll have that all on there and everything. So these are all done. So as you saw in the last study group, Devise is going to do a lot of really cool things for you. And we're going to go ahead and get started from the very beginning. Like Corina said, I recommend installing Devise right off the bat if that's what you're going to use. Like, don't go through and build out a bunch of tables, and then especially like your user table or anything like that, and then later on decide you're going to use Devise. It's possible, but you'll be doing a lot of like backtracking and a lot of deleting things and a lot of conflict negotiation is what I call it. It won't be happy about it. So we're going to, and Oauth is the same way. Oauth is something you can do at any time, but you can do it right off the bat. As soon as you generate Devise, you can do Oauth. So we're going to go ahead and create a user because we're going to need one. So we're going to generate a Devise user. All right, so let's go take a look. There we go. So you got your email, you got your encrypted password, and everything that comes with Devise. You can just leave it just exactly how it is. So now something that's a little different that you'll have to do if you're using Postgres. So before, right now, once you create a schema, you could do Rails. You can migrate, do your Rails migration. You can't do that right off the bat with Postgres. In fact, if you try, I'll show you the error. Can everybody see the bottom of my screen? Sometimes Zoom is weird about that. Good, thumbs up, anyone? Cool. If you try to do Rails DB migrate just right off the bat with Postgres, you'll get an error. And it'll say, no database. Because with Postgres, you have to create your database. So you'll do that with Rails DB create. Yep, created the databases. You have a development and a test one. And now we can run Rails DB migrate. There we go. And we're going to need the views. So we're going to go ahead and generate those and get them done with. So we're going to do Rails Devise views. And this is part of project planning. I misspelled something, I'm sure. Oh, yeah. You have to actually generate it. This is part of project planning. If you already know that you're going to need these things, even if you don't need them just yet, just go ahead and do it like while you have it. And that way, once you're in your code, you don't have to keep coming back to your terminal over and over again to set all this up. All right, so now those of you who are in the last study group saw the views. We're going to go take a look at them again real quick. App, views, Devise, generated all of these views for you. And we'll be using those here in just a moment. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into our routes. And you see it did the Devise for root users. Then we're going to do a route to, let's see, how do we want to do this? Application, JavaScript land. Welcome. All right, so someone in the last study group, what are we doing here? Pop quiz.
Isn't that just our homepage? Like if we didn't write anything in the URL?
Right, like, that's exactly it. It's we're just going to do the homepage. We're going to set that up just so that we can verify that this is all working the way it's supposed to do. So we're going to do a new folder, application, and in that folder, our new file. Cool. And we're going to go ahead and put some stuff in here so that we can see as we're testing OAuth that it's working. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to say, let's see, we'll say if user signed in, and this will look super familiar. Cool. And we're going to say, if they're signed in, we'll say H1, hello. That was about. That syntax is being weird on me. And I'm not going to get too far into like doing all the customization stuff. I just want to be able to show that it's actually working. So we're going to just grab their email because something's already in there. We don't have to mess with like adding a custom name, but you could do with the name or anything else you want to do. And we're going to do just the first part of it. So we're going to split it on the @ and then we're just going to grab the first part. So it's going to split that into 2 arrays, and then we're just going to grab the first part of that array. And then because I don't want to keep going in and deleting session cookies, we're going to do link to. And again, this part I know is going to look super familiar, but this is just setting up some testing for us. By the way, if anybody's using Atom and they're running into this issue where the syntax stops working, I'll show you how to fix that in just a second, because I don't like it either. All right, so while I'm typing this out, why am I calling destroy user sessions? Anybody? Or destroy user sessions path? Come on, I know you know.
You're clearing the session.
Right, yeah. I'll tell you for future reference, especially during like your reviews and things, what you think is the right answer probably is the right answer. Like, don't second guess yourself, just go ahead. I don't know how many times in my project reviews I would hesitate because I wasn't for sure. And then the reviewer would tell me the answer and it was exactly what I was thinking. I could have looked much more intelligent and just guessed. But anyway, so the syntax thing, where it's not giving your syntax. It's an Atom thing that they know about, and as far as I can tell, they're never going to fix it. If you just delete the first character at the top of your screen and just add it back, it puts all the syntax back in place. If anybody else is using Atom and had that issue. And yeah, you'll have to do it every time.
I have a question for, I know that Corinna talked about you have to, for the destroy path, you have to include the action delete. Is there a reason why why it's only for that and you wouldn't include it for the edit path?
So by default, the routes automatically assume a get method. So as long as it's a get method, you don't have to tell it. You don't have to specify. If it's anything other than get, you're going to have to tell it. So if it's a patch request or a delete request, you're going to have to say delete. So you know how like when you're doing your tables, if it's a string, you don't, like when you're typing it out in your terminal, if it's a string, you don't have to say string. It just assumes like name is going to be a string if you don't say so. But if you were going to want it to be an integer, you have to tell it to be an integer. So it's the same thing.
Isn't
Okay,
another reason so that you can't, it doesn't turn up in the URL path, like you can't, what am I trying to say? I just had a lab where you don't want someone to be able to, I'm going to shut up because I don't know how to formulate what I want to say.
I think I know what you're talking about. That's a different thing. So what you're talking about is like, so in routes, you can do something like only index, so that it only shows like the index for that route, that set of routes. Like, so you could do like users only sessions or something. And that'll do that. That'll make it so that this will still show up. Even having this here, you're still going to go to a destroy users path.
Yeah, no, that's not.
I think I understand what you meant though. Like the other paths, they would load up like a form, right? And this would just clear the session.
Yeah, there's no form for the delete method.
They do tell you in one of the lessons, Korea, why you should put the delete and not leave it as a guess.
Well, you have to. So when you're making, if you use it as a get, it won't work. Because get is getting information. That's why it's called get. So when you're using your get method for an index, you're getting that array of users. When you're doing a delete method, you're sending information, telling it to delete the session, right? So getting the session isn't going to help you. So get won't work. Same thing with patch. So like patch, you're changing the information. You're not getting the information. So you're patching it. You're fixing it.
Okay, so in the lesson, it says it's tempting, but don't attach this to a get route. It says logging out. It says the get routes don't change anything. But when you're logging out, you're changing something. You're changing the state of it. And they say, plus, you don't want someone to be able to put a link, HTTP, www, your website /logout. You don't want them to put a logout link to your website on their email or on a message board.
Well, yeah, because that can, you can log someone out, but you can also, so when you're using a get method with it, you can get that session ID.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Like if I go to your website and I think, oh, that's a really cool website. I want to email a link to that website to my friend because I think she should check it out too. I don't want to email her a link saying bryant.com log out. And if I use a get, then the logout is written out in the thingamajig, in the URL address. Well, that's what they say in the lesson anyway.
Well, let's look at the routes that we have. So as you can see, there is no logout route to start with for users. There's no route for logout. So what you're sending to is the destroy user or the sign out route. So that's what you're talking about. So what you're sending to, and this tells you right here what method you have to use to get to it. See where it says like delete, post, get, patch, put, post. So anytime it's a get, so any of these, you don't have to put this because it assumes get. That's the default. If it's anything else, post, delete, patch, you have to put it in because it's going to try it as a get and it won't work. Because in any of these, so in the patch or post or a delete, you're doing something to the back end without retrieving the information. Does that make a little more sense?
Yeah. Sorry for the tangent.
No, like this is why I do this. I actually, one of my favorite things is errors and questions about weird things people come up with, because maybe it's something I didn't know yet, and then I can learn something too. All right, let's see. Where are we at? All right, we got all that. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like. By the way, did everybody know about doing this, like Rails routes in the terminal? Okay. I know she does it in the browser quite often. I didn't know if you guys have seen the terminal yet. And the grep right there. So instead of having to view every single route that you have, you can specify like I only want routes pertaining to users, or if users have apples, you could say apples, and I only want the routes pertaining to apples. So you can narrow it down. But let's take a look at it. Oops, that's JavaScript. Y'all have no idea how much Zoom has slowed all this stuff down. All right, so that's the welcome. And if we look at our code, that's the welcome from right here. So what happened was it checked to see if there was a user signed in. No one was signed in, so it skipped all that. And it's just displaying our welcome page. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel this server because we're going to need to anyway in just a minute. And now the fun part. All right, so now we're getting into OAuth. So let's do that. We're going to need our browser for this. You're going to get to see OAuth for Facebook, GitHub, and Google done all at the same time. So you can have any one of these. You can just do one. You can do all three. DigitalOcean, Twitter, all of them have their own OAuths too that all work pretty much exactly the same as this. So if you were like, well, I didn't want to use any of these, I was going to want to use Twitter. It'll pan out the same way. You just would have to go to the Twitter website. So the first one we're going to do is Facebook. And Facebook is at developers.facebook.com. All right. So with like Twitter, Facebook, Google, all of them, if you're not sure the exact website, easiest thing to do is they're almost some developers. It's almost always developer something or console or something like that. But if you're not sure, you can always Google like Twitter developer login. So from here, you're going to go to My Apps, and you're going to create an app. See, there's my Harry Potter Daily Prophet. You're going to create an app. So we're going to give it a name. We'll just call it Oauth Tutorial. Your contact email. And then you're going to do create app ID. Prove you're not a robot. That's going to take you to this. So from here, you're going to go to settings. You're going to go to basic. And this gives you your app ID and your app secret. So we're going to go ahead and grab those. Do not put these in your application. Never put app IDs or app secrets directly in your app. So we're going to grab Facebook's app ID. We're going to do this. We're going to grab the app secret. I'm going to do that for Facebook. All right. So now we have to go into app domains right here. You're going to do localhost. HTTP.
Sorry, I think I missed something. Is this so a user can sign in with like Facebook, with their Facebook account? They can sign into your app. Okay.
Yes. And this Devise is not a requirement for your projects, but allowing a user to log in using Facebook or Google or GitHub or something like that is a requirement.
Oh, that is a requirement.
Yes.
Okay.
Doing this part of it is a requirement.
Okay.
You don't have to use Devise to do it. Every one of these websites, if you're not using Devise, has documentation on how to set up API calls or to do it with other. There's also other authentications out there with Devise. I think there's one called like Wizard. So while Devise itself is not a requirement, it's the most commonly used one. So that's why we're doing the study group on setting this up through Devise.
Ah, okay. Sorry.
Okay, so now we got localhost 3000. That's right, it's in localhost. Okay, so what if you're one of these people that have changed this? I've seen some people where they changed their Rails app to come up on like 8080 or 3001. Whatever your local host is what you need to put here. So whatever you go to when you go to, you know, localhost, it's going to say error, but whenever you go to here, that's what you need. That's what's going to go in there. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. They have to be able to sign up with either Facebook or Twitter, or you can't do like a sign up through Google or anything?
No, you can't. It has to be, it can be anything. They don't care who you use
Okay.
for OAuth. Yeah, you can use GitHub, you can use Devotion, you can use Twitter. I'm sure there's other ones out there. I think it's like some of the gaming websites have their own auth where you can auth in like through Google Play and stuff like that. You can use any one you want, but you have to use them. This will show you how to do 3 of the more popular ones all at one time. All right, so we're going to go down here. We're going to go all the way to the bottom. You can fill all this stuff out, but you don't really have to. It's not required. Click on Add Platform. You're on a website, so we're not making a game or any of this stuff. We're doing a website. Your site URL is the same as before. So if you have, like if you build this and then you deploy it to like Heroku, you're going to have to come back and change these. This is whatever that website's domain name is. So you would put in your Heroku domain when you deploy. So that's something to remember. If you do decide to put this like on Heroku or something, for it to work, you're going to have to come back and change anywhere that you put localhost to the new URL that you have. And then we're going to click Save Changes. And we're done. So now we'll do GitHub next. All right, so GitHub doesn't have a particular developer login. You just go to GitHub. You go over in the corner to where your profile picture is at, click on that. And you're going to go to Settings. And then at the bottom on the left, Developer Settings. You're going to click on that. You have 3 choices here. You're going to do OAuth Apps. And then you're going to do New OAuth App right here on the right. So we're going to do OAuth tutorial for that too. Homepage URL is the same thing, localhost, or whatever your URL is. You can skip the description. You don't have to do that. Now this one's a little different. This one's asking for a callback URL. So that's going to be your domain, users, auth, GitHub, callback. So domain/user/auth/GitHub/callback. They're all the same. Every one of them that I've run into has that same format. Users, auth, / whatever their name is, and then callback. This is where it's checking for that session. So we're going to register our application here. And that's that kind of shows you why naming conventions are really important too, because, for example, all the developers that develop this OAuth stuff, they all assume the callback is going to be users/auth/callback. So if you mess around with your routes too much and you change those routes, it's going to mess up your OAuth because they don't know what to do. So here we're going to do the same thing, client ID. We'll grab that and our client secret. And I'm going to post this video after we're done. I'll have gone through and disabled all this afterwards. So you can't use my client ID and client secret. You definitely don't want to put yours out there anywhere. So if you decide to do your own tutorial version of this and you're messing around with this, make sure that before you even post a video on it, you went back and deleted all of this so people can't use it. And you don't want to put it anywhere in your app, which we'll get to, like how to hide that here in a minute. All right, so next we're going to go to Google. Now, Google's is console.developers.google.com. If you go to it without all the extra stuff, this is what it will look like. All right, so you get your nice little dashboard here. So at the top, you'll click, it already logs you into your most recently used app. You just click on New Project right here. You create a name. There. You hit create. Gives you this little status, you wait for it. Cool. So now all you have to do is click on view. And to verify, make sure you're on the right one. So if you have multiple apps running in here, make sure that the one that you're currently working on is right up here next to Google APIs, or you'll be changing stuff on one of your other projects. So you have all of these different options here. We're going to go back. Project settings. This gives you all kinds of different things, but stuff we're not even worried about, right? We're in the IM admin settings. You want to be right back here. Because the next thing you're going to want is your credentials. Now you actually should go here first on OAuth consent screen, but I'm going to show you what happens if you set up your credentials without setting up the consent screen first. That way, in case you forget, you'll know what it looks like. So you're going to go in here. You're going to, at the top, it says plus create credentials. We're going to click on that. We're going to click on OAuth client ID. And then it tells you, you can't create one without configuring the consent screen first. So that's what will happen. So you'll go to configure consent screen. Like I said, you can go to it first. Internal is for if you only want people from like your business to be able to sign in. So like, you know, like you can go through Google and get your own custom domain name. You can have like your email at, you know, flatiron.com. So you could actually set it up so that only people with flatiron.com can sign up. But we're going to do an external, anyone with a Google account. Application name. And these names the names here don't matter. You can name them whatever you want to. So here's something that's a little different. So if you've been paying attention, every time we've come anywhere where it talks about domains, we've been putting in localhost. It won't let you here. This isn't where you put it in. So if you try to, it'll give you this error. Cannot contain port. So here, we just skip this for now. We don't put in websites. But this is where you would go if you deployed it. This is where like your Heroku domain name would go to. So you can click on save. Now we'll go to credentials, create credentials, OAuth client ID, application type, web app. So we're not doing any of these, we're doing a web app. Same thing, just name it. Like, so you can name these things anything you want. Just try to be consistent. Yeah. That's what I said. Right?
Is there like a convention you should follow when you're naming it?
For the most part, naming it the same thing that you named your project is the best way to do it. When you only have 1 or 2 projects sitting on Google, for example, it's really easy for you to remember which one's which, no matter what you named it. But think about businesses that might have like 200 projects listed there. They want to know which one, like in their code base, which one does this go to? So naming them the same helps you narrow that down. So this is where we're going to go in and add our URI. So you're going to do it under authorized JavaScript origins. Now, I know you're in Rails, so that threw me a little bit, but there is some JavaScript going on behind the scenes here. And this is where you put in your localhost. So that's why you skip it on the first screen. You're going to put it in here. And then here, that's that redirect URL that I was talking about before. I'm going to copy it from here. So you'll see that for Google, it's the same format. Your domain /users/auth. Their authorization is called Oauth2, Google Oauth2 /callback. So they don't want to do that. So they all use the same format. That's why naming conventions are important. Click create. Cool. Now we've got our client ID and our client secret. So we're going to copy that and we're going to put that on our handy dandy little notepad. Cool. Now, the reason why I set all these up first before I even go into the code, before I even install the gems that I need or anything like that, is it takes a few minutes for all of this to sort of populate through the internet, right? So if you built out your app and you built all your code and then you went and signed up for Google Oauth and turned around and tried to test it right away, it might not work. And you'll be spending an hour trying to figure out why it doesn't work when you just needed to wait 5 minutes and try again. So if you do this first, by the time you get around to testing it, when you're writing your code, it should all be populated and ready to go. And as I said before, we're doing these 3, but you can do Twitter, DigitalOcean, anyone that you find that has a login feature like that, you can use it. And the project requirements are just to pick one. So we go back to our code. Oauth study. Did I delete that or close it? Oh, there it is. Too many things open at one time. All right. So now we got to go back to our gems. So we got some more gems to install. So we had to install all the OAuth gems. So we're going to install one for each one. Gem, and they're all mostly the same. Make sure I'm spelling that right. Yep, Facebook. We're going to install the gem for GitHub. And Google's is a little different, as you saw in that callback URL. It's going to be Google-OAuth2. So what happened is it used to just be Google OAuth. They updated it so much that instead of even trying to release like a new version or update the original code, they just released a brand new one. So they just called it OAuth2. Now, something I do, you can go through and try to do it without adding this gem. But if you run into any real issues with it, come back and add Auth by itself. So in theory, and I say this lightly, in theory, these all include Auth with them, the gem Auth. But I've run into several issues on my projects and projects I did afterwards that these alone weren't working, and if I just added this gem, it fixed the problem. So if you've been hunting errors forever and you can't figure it out, just add this gem, just see what happens. I mean, it's one gem, it doesn't hurt anything. So we're going to save that. We're going to do, actually, we're going to have one more gem. This is important. So gem, active record. This is who controls your sessions here. So we're going to do active record, session, store, right? I'm going to leave that there for just a second. Anyone writing it down can like write it down real quick if they want to. But I am recording this, so if you need to go back and like pause the video to figure out what gems you have to install. And I'll be uploading this project to GitHub when we're done as well. So you can come back and be like, oh, what gems did I install? Oh, here they are. Okay. So now we're going to do bundle install. That was quick. Let me make sure that. LMOO, yep, there they are. Okay, that was just really quick. All right, so the next thing we have to do. So we're gonna go and set up those in variables. So we got the keys and the client IDs and the client secrets, but we don't want to put them anywhere in our project. We don't want anyone else to know them, so they have to go somewhere. Now, does anybody use like .env, .env, or anything like that, environment variables yet? Okay, so what environment variables do is it allows you to take something secret like that, like a session ID, or in this case, our IDs and client secrets, put them somewhere so that your app has access to them, but when you upload to GitHub, it does not upload those things. So like, for example, my Harry Potter would work in development, but if you were to go and fork that repo and you just try to run it, it wouldn't work because you don't have access. Even though the environment variables are in the app, you don't have access to what those environment variables mean because they're on my computer. But that's what we're going to do first. Now, so there's several ways to do environment variables, but Rails has one already built in. You don't have to do anything about it. So we're going to go, and it's called Rails credentials. So if you look up here in your config folder, you have this credentials, YAML, encoded. If you click on that, this is what it looks like. It's this giant hexadecimal string, right? So it's just all kinds of craziness. Don't ever edit this file. Don't ever put anything in it. Don't ever change anything. Don't even mess with it. To edit this behind the scenes, we have to do it through the command line. So to do that, what you're going to have to do is in your command line, type in editor in all caps, right? And then you're going to, here, I'm going to put Atom, but you put whatever code editor you're using. So if you're using Sublime or whatever you're using, that's where you'll put the name of it in. So like when you run an app and in your command line, you put in, you know, for me, I put like Atom dot to open that folder in my editor. That's what you'd put here. And then you're going to do a flag called wait. Excuse me. So if you don't do this flag, what's going to happen is Atom is going to open this file and then close it before you even have a chance to do anything. Here you're saying, hey, open this file, but wait for me to do something before you close it. And then you're going to call Rails credentials edit. So this opens. So it's another credentials YAML. It'll have a number in the front. This one has like 4236. If you notice, like there's some stuff already in here. Your secret key base is already in here. I do believe in Sinatra, you guys had to use like a session ID or a key that you had to like just put directly into it. You called it like secret right in the thing. So this is a different way that you could store that. So I love that they have this in here. This part for, this is for Amazon, by the way. This is for being able to upload pictures. Have a user be able to upload pictures from your website to the cloud and then access it. So that's what this is for. I actually do a tutorial on that too. But it tells you, it gives you the idea what the format should look like. So it's going to look the same. Facebook, if you make sure you spell it right? Facebook. And we're going to go into our block, and then we're going to put Facebook client ID, right? And Facebook client secret. Now, this is one of those things, again, where it doesn't matter what you name it. You can name this whatever you want. You could say Bob's client ID. But you're going to be using this through your code. So you want to name it things that make sense. And then future you is going to want to know what this meant when you're finding it in your code and you're like, what is a Bob client ID? I don't even know what that is. But if you call it Facebook client ID, you know. So we're going to grab from our notepad, handy dandy notepad, and we're just going to put that in there. And we'll grab this other one, and I'm going to put that right there. And then I'm just going to copy this because we're going to do it 2 more times for each one of them. There we go. So we had what, GitHub. There we go. And we had Google. Now we'll grab our notebook, GitHub. And Google. Does anybody have any questions about what I'm doing here? So these are the client ID and the client secrets that you got from each individual website that we went to when we signed up for that OAuth ID. And you're going to store them all in here. This file does not get uploaded. So when I commit this to GitHub, you won't be able to find this anywhere. This stays on your computer. So it's going to work while you have it in development, but it won't work if you deploy it. If you deploy it, it's a whole different process. Everything up to here is the same, but then this part is a different process if you have it like on Heroku. All right, so now this is a little different than other files. So you want to save it, but if you leave this open and try to continue on, you're going to get errors because your app doesn't know anything about this file yet. To get this to persist so that your app has access to it, you actually have to close the file. And if you look down here on the terminal, I know it's a little hard to see. Let me do this. Move it up a little bit. If you look down here, when I close it, think because I hit clear. Okay. So when we close it, it's all still in there. Good. You'll see it says file encrypted and saved. So it doesn't save the file. Even if you save it, you still need to save it the new way you do it, but it won't work until you close that file. Now you can verify if you're not sure, like earlier when I hit clear and then I closed it and didn't say file encrypted and saved, you can, go back into the editor and do that, but you can also do Rails credentials show. And it'll show you what's in there. It's also a really handy way if you're wanting to use, say, this Facebook information like on another app or something, you can just go in and grab it without having to open the whole editor. All right. So I told you guys this was going to be a long one. Like, this is a lot of stuff. It's a good thing it's recording. So if you have to hop out, I'll have it recorded. But so now we're going to configure Devise. We're going to go into config, initializers. We're going to go to Devise. So this is what Karina was talking about. There's a ton of options in here. The one you need is going to be near the bottom. So you can just go ahead and go all the way down to the bottom. And you're going to look for Auauth. And if you see right here, and I'll go ahead and this gives you the basic format of it. And if you're doing, say, GitHub first, or you're just doing one like Google, if you want to test to make sure this works before you deal with environment variables, you can go ahead and put your app ID and your app secret directly here. But before you push it to GitHub, use an environment variable. A lot of people will test anytime you have to have like an ID or some kind of like API key or something like that, just put it directly in just while you're testing it. All right, so this next part is a lot. Instead of spending 20 minutes typing it out, I'm just going to copy and paste it for my notes, and then we will go over it line by line. Okay. So what we're doing here, you're going to have to do this config Auauth for each one that you do. So if you're doing one, you only have to do one. If you're doing three, like here, you have to do 3 of them. If you're doing 6, you have to do 6 of them. You're going to do config Auauth to whichever one it is. So Facebook, GitHub, Google. Now this is your environment variable. This Rails application credentials dig. That's the environment variable. So what this is doing here is .dig. I don't know if any of y'all run into, have y'all used .dig yet? It's kind of like .find. So what .dig does is going to retrieve a value from an array or a hash, and it's going to give it a set of keys. So that's what these are. Facebook is a key. That's that top level key that we had in the block. And then Facebook client ID is one of the keys within that block. So given a set of keys, it's going to check through that array or the hash step by step. If it finds a value, it's going to return that value. So as it's going through that entire mile-long hash, as it finds the Facebook key, and the Facebook key has the Facebook client ID, and if that has a value, it'll return the value. If it doesn't have a value, it's going to return nil. So you're going to do that for all of these. You'll see here we have scope. Scope is optional. I recommend using it. Scope gives you control over what you're getting back. So when someone logs in, so when your user logs in using Facebook, Scope gives you control of what do you want back from them? Well, here I want anything that's available in their public profile. So anything they've already said is like, cool, I'm okay with it being public. Oh, did I break up? Okay, my stuff froze up a second. And then I want their email. So here we have GitHub. I just want the user's information and their public repos. Google, same thing. Google's a little different. They like to be different. I want the user info email and the user info profile. So anything that in their profile that Google will give me, I want that.
Where would you find these scope variables?
In each of these, in their documentation, so in the developer stuff, so like on Google, they'll have like a walkthrough on how to like set these up and what the scopes are. Google themselves, you can set up scope like on their side of it instead of even setting it up here. But it's like anything else, like Rails has their own like documentation for stuff. Google has documentation for their authorizations. Facebook does too. The problem is, and the main reason why I decided to do this is that none of what they document applies to Devise. Because once you step out of like Rails, you'll never use Devise again. So a lot of developers that are using like JavaScript and JavaScript libraries to develop, that's what most is getting used the most. And Rails is mostly just kind of a back-end thing. You don't see a need to use this here. There's ways to do it. It's easier. Like on the JavaScript side, all of this can be done like a single link. I can just link to Google's API for logging in, and then I'm done. I don't have to do all this. So I guess they're just kind of assuming that you're not using Devise when they walk you through all of it. All right, so everyone caught up, like everyone knows what's going on here. Everyone understand how this works. So if you're using a different environment variable program like .env, you can look into, that's where you would put that. If you want to just paste the ID and the secret directly in here just to test it before dealing with environment variables to make sure it works, you can. Just don't put it to GitHub that way. All right, so now we have to add a file. So in your config folder, first you look. Sometimes the file is already there. Sometimes it's not. I had it one time show up on its own, and ever since then, it's never shown up again. So what you're going to look for is a file called session store. As you can see here, there's not one. So we're just going to create one. Under initialize, new file, session_store.rb. All right, so what we're going to put in here, again, I'm just going to copy it and then we'll go over it. And you're going to see something that Kareem was talking about too. The weird syntax there. All right. So now we're going into the Rails applications. We're going into the configurations for the session store, which is that gem that we installed. So we're getting this from that session store gem. Active record. Key is Devise OmniAuth session. So this is telling session store that we're going to be using Devise's OmniAuth session instead of writing our own. All right, so now we're getting there, guys. Appreciate all y'all sticking with me. I have. It's a lot. It's a lot to cover. I think this is why they don't cover it, because it's a lot. So we're going to run a migration. So what we need we're going to update our users. Because we're going to have to add a couple extra columns to our users. So we're going to go in There we go. Pop quiz. Anybody know the syntax for adding a column? No?
Add
Add
underscore.
column.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. So we're going to add a column. And we're going to add this column to users. Right? And it's going to be, the column's name is going to be provider.
I haven't seen it written like this
So this is just a
in
short,
parenthesis.
yeah, this is just a short way if you're going to be adding a lot of things to it instead of having to do it. Because then we can go ahead and add a provider as a string, and we're going to limit, this is important,
Stop, Daddy Cooks. No, sorry.
we're going to limit the size of the string to 50 characters. This will help prevent people from like taking over your app. We will not accept any null values. And default is going to be blank, and that's going to help with error handling. So since we're saying that we don't want it to be null, we have to like start it out with something, or it's going to error because it's null. So we're just going to start it out as blank. Then we're going to copy this, because we're going to do the same thing, except instead of provider, unique identifier. All right. It's going to be a string as well, and its limit is going to be 500 characters. It'll also be defaults for null, and the default value is going to be blank. Right. So now you're going to do something you might not have seen yet. We're going to do an add index. We're going to index on sessions. We're going to index with session ID. And then we're going to tell it that unique to true. So, you know, like in your validations that you guys did with Sinatra, you can do that directly in the database. You can do like, you can check your validations just right off in the database. You don't have to do it in the model. And then we're going to do add index again for sessions and update it at. Spell that right. All right. So we're going to add all these columns to our Devise users column or table. So we're going to run Rails DB migrate. Oh, I got an error. What did I misspell? I guarantee it's something I misspelled. Relation sessions does not exist. You're right, it doesn't. So what we're going to do, actually, I'm going to just get rid of that. We got to create a sessions migration. I jumped ahead. I'm trying to like hurry up because it's already been an hour. All right. So we got to do our sessions first. That was my bad. So Rails G migration, create sessions. Let's go in here. So the first thing you need in here is going to be a string sessions ID or session ID, singular session ID. This one you also do not want to come back as null. And then we're going to do text data. Do you all know the difference between a string and a text? No?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Somewhat.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
I don't know. Marsha,
Yeah.
what did you?
I think the text gives you more space.
Mm-hmm.
The string is more limited in characters.
Yeah. So a string has a maximum character count of 225, I believe. So if you need the ability to have anything that's going to be larger than 225 characters, you go with text. This data value can be very, very, very long. All right. So now this is where I jumped ahead at. This is what I get for like having too many things open at one time. So this is where you add that. I know, Marsha, I think you had like a billion things open too. Like you feel my pain, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right, so same thing. So we're indexing on sessions to session ID. We want to make sure that's unique.
Sorry. The add okay. The add index was like the validations from the Sinatra project.
Mm-hmm. Well, this part is. So the rest of this, what this is doing is giving the database something to index on. So you remember like your join tables, was it you indexed on your join tables?
Can you explain what you mean by index on?
So what you're doing there is when it's looking through your database, it knows what to look for. Here, when you're making a call to your database, it's going to look for the session ID.
Okay.
It doesn't need this. It would take too much time to look at this. Like it needs it to function, but it doesn't need it when you're calling it.
Okay.
So you're
Okay.
saying, yeah, you're saying, so when you look at me, look here.
Okay. So I know that I was talking to Priya about this, that many people rag on Rails for being slow.
Mm-hmm.
Is this one of the things that keeps it efficient and fast?
Yeah, it'll make it a lot faster. You'll realize too in the development community, when people are talking about things being slow, a lot of times they're talking about like a microsecond. Like they're not even talking about like anything major. So the difference in speeds that you'll see at the type of applications you're building right now, you'll never even notice it. Like you won't even be able to measure it.
Mm-hmm.
But on an application like Netflix or Facebook or something,
yeah, when you have a large database behind it.
You got 1 million users, you want to save every millisecond you can, because if you have 1 million users, that milliseconds can add up to an hour.
Right.
For that's line 9,
Mm-hmm.
you have that add index on line 8. What is the next one? Does that like?
It's so that if we need to know when the session was updated, to look here instead of looking the whole thing. So that's what this timestamp is. We're looking at the timestamp. That's why when you run your migrations on Rails projects, it almost always includes like that timestamp. And it's one of those things where you never need it until you do. Like for example, if a user is like, I signed up a year ago, you could go look at when they signed up. Or they can say, for here, like this example, you can say, the user's like, well, I logged in yesterday. Why can't I log in today? You can look. Did they log in yesterday? You can get that timestamp. And you'll run into that a lot where you're adding things that you might never use in your application, but it's sort of just standard to go ahead and add them in case you do. All right, so let's make sure that's saved. Cool. Now we'll go back to updating the users table. And you guys already saw that. So I'm just going to copy and paste it and put it in. And you were saying earlier you hadn't seen it this way. This is just a different syntax, a different way of doing it. Always be careful when you're copying and pasting things. All right, so now let's see if we can migrate. There we go. Cool. So now you're gonna hear that a lot. So now there's a lot of steps. All right, so we're gonna go up to our models, and we have a user model. Now Devise goes ahead and puts in all of this stuff. We're gonna add one more to that. We're gonna add omni-authable. Edit. Omni-authable, right? We're going to tell it that our omni-auth, providers. Remember we added that provider table, the column to the table. That's where this is going to come in handy. And we're just going to go ahead and pass in every one of those. So we had Facebook, right? We had GitHub, and we had Google's. Again, remember it's a little, Google has that extra Oauth 2 on there. So if you only had one, of course you'd only put one. You would just put like Facebook. But because we have 3, we're going to put all of them in. This is another thing that I'm going to copy and paste from my notes, and then we'll go over it. It'll save some time typing it all out. Okay. All right, so we're going to create a method. Everyone pretty comfortable with what self means in methods? Okay, I'm afraid you should be by now. So we're going to call this on self. So we're going to create from provider data. So that's what all this is, all the stuff we've been doing. Then we're going to search that column that we created in our table, that provider column, for the provider data, that unique ID column. Remember we made that. We're going to search for the provider data's unique ID. We're going to grab the first, or we're going to create one, and we're getting their user email and user password. So here for user email, we're going to get the email that the provider is giving us. So when they sign in with Facebook, we're getting the email that that user's used on Facebook. So Facebook is giving us their email. But when you, like, for example, if you ever log in with something with Google or Facebook, it never asks you for a password. And this is where Devise gets a little tricky. Devise has to have a password. It's going to check for one. So what we're pulling in here is we're generating a friendly token. So it's a random number, 0 through 20. It's a series of numbers as sort of an arbitrary password, just so that Devise is happy. The user will never need to know this password. They'll never need it for anything. They can always log in with Facebook again. But this is so that Devise doesn't complain about not getting a password, because Facebook isn't going to share your Facebook password. Not going to happen. All right, so after you do that, you need a controller. Do not generate any Devise controllers. Please don't. You'll break everything. Everything will break. We're
Do you
going to
think do you think you could explain line 9 a little bit? I'm
Sure.
getting a little lost of what's
Okay, so when you were in Ruby land, do you remember using where?
yeah.
Okay. So same thing here. We're searching the table. We're looking for where provider. So remember the column we created called provider? So
Yeah.
we're searching that column for the provider data, which is what we're passing in, dot provider. So this is Facebook, GitHub, Google. That's what this is. And then the unique ID. So that's the other column that we created. We're searching for that.
So what is an example of this provider data that would be being, what would it look like?
So remember in our config, in Devise, our scope.
Yeah, the scope.
Yeah, that's our provider data. That's what they're sending us. So whatever it is you're getting from the provider is what's going in there. So if it's their public profile, could include a bunch of stuff. That's the data. So it can include their profile image. It could include like their about me. It just depends on what the provider is. Everyone does something different. Whatever it is they provide, that's what's going there. And then when you go back into your
so are you assuming that provider data has a key called provider?
Yeah, well, so it's its name. The provider is Facebook, or its name is GitHub. It's like industry standard.
Oh, okay.
And then the UID, provider data.uid. So this is stuff like, it's one of those abstract things where a lot of stuff is going on behind the scenes here.
I guess I'm just, so you're saying that those provider and UID keys, they're usually come with provider data.
Yeah,
like we could assume.
So when you log in, that's what Google is sending you.
Right.
Sending your app.
Okay.
And that's why here, that's why here we're saying we want the user's email. That's going to be equal to the provider data's. And then, so you'll learn about JSON and APIs and doing all that, but we're digging into it. We're digging into, with all that data they sent, under info, grab their email. And we're going to assign that to user email. And this can be anything. You can say whatever you want here, but that's what you're going to use throughout the rest of your app. So you want to try to keep your names smart.
I guess I'm just wondering, like, if instead we used like Twitter or some other OAuth path, like would all of them contain like, info, a key with info that leads to email?
Yes.
So they usually are.
Yeah, it's a standard.
Okay.
It's a standard pattern that you would use. Yeah.
So when you're eventually you're going to have to build your own API for your JavaScript and React projects, and you'll see that there's a standard to like how they're set up. Now that's not saying that there isn't some like smaller, like coolwebsite.com that allows you to do that doesn't use the standard, and it wouldn't work here. But any of the big name ones you go through are going to use that standard. You'll learn about serializations and all of that as you progress, and that's part of like you want your API to come out looking like the standard. Even if you don't do it exactly that way there, it'll change all that for you, and so it's all got a standard to it.
Thank you.
So yeah, so that's where you're getting all that. And then, like I said, the password, Google, Facebook, none of them are going to send a password. They're not going to reveal that data. That's not in there defined. So we have to give it one. So we're just creating a number. That's all we're doing here. We're just creating a random number so that Devise is happy, because Devise automatically checks from get-go whether there's a password or not. And it would error without that password. So this is just going to make Devise happy, so you don't get any errors. The user will never need to know the randomly generated number. You'll never need to know the randomly generated number. It's just sort of bypassing Devise's little quirks. All right, did I create that controller? I guess nope, I didn't. Okay, let's create a controller. Rails controller, and we're going to just call this one Oauth. I always struggle with spelling that. Oauth. Yep. All right, so now we got our controller. Right. So now I haven't, sort of what Karina was showing you, I haven't created any views, right? I haven't done anything. I haven't created anything. Like, I haven't done anything. We're going to go and take a look at this real quick.
I have to go. I'm sorry. It's
It's okay.
lunchtime.
Yeah, I understand.
Thank you.
No problem. I'll post this when it's done. It's being recorded. All right, so we can go back into our local host. We got our welcome page. We can go to /users sign up. That's the route for sign up, if you remember that before. Already we have the form, and without even needing to create those links. Remember how she created the links? They're already there. Right. Out of that, let's go back into our code. We are almost done. We're getting down to the nitty gritty. All right, so in our Oauth controller, and it's another one of those things where I'm going to copy and paste it because this is a lot of code, and this will save time. Just copy and paste it and go over it. All right, so this looks like a lot because it is, but it's the same thing just repeated over and over again. So we're going to go over it. So we're defining a method. We're going to name it after whichever provider that you have. So if you only have one, if you only did Facebook, you only need this one. We're going to say that the user is equal to user.createFromProviderData. So that's the data that they sent us. If the user persisted, we're going to check that. We're going to sign in and redirect at user. Because I have root set up, that's where it'll redirect to. So hope it redirects to. Flash errors, we're just setting up error handling. And if there's a problem, we're going to redirect to the new user registration URL. And we just do the same thing with each one, exactly the same. The only thing you're changing is GitHub here. You're going to change, you want to change your error handling to handle GitHub. And you're going to do that here as well. So it's one of those handy dandy things that you can just copy and paste and then just change the names on after you do the first one. Then down here is if none of this works, if everything just crashes and fails, then we'll call the failure method. Now,
Where are you calling that failure method though? Because I see that if it's not persisted, you're doing flash error. There was a problem signing up with Google, and then you redirect them to the sign up page again. Yeah.
So this is if it fails before it gets this. So like it looks in Oauth controller. So this is something that you're getting from Oauth. And let's say you forgot to include the GitHub, right? And then, because you can create your own links for these. It created its links for you, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. But let's say you created a GitHub link to sign in, but you don't have a method for it, and you click on it, it doesn't even know to get to here. So that's what this is for.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Or if like maybe you had these 3, but then you added a Twitter link.
Wait, so how does it know to go to that failure message when
through OmniAuth, through that gem.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's just something that it knows to do.
Yeah, the gem's handling all of that for you. You won't ever call any of this like in your code anywhere. And you can change your messages, and you can change where it redirects to, and you can take care of all that. So in Devise, where those links we were talking about in the views, if you go to, let's see, it's in sessions. I'm sorry, it's in shared. The shared links, remember that piece of code that Karina deleted, the shared links rendering?
Yeah.
That's what this is. So if you delete it, it's not going to work. If you look all the way down at the bottom, you'll see if device mapping omniauthable. So that's where we added that omniauthable to the model. It's going to look over every single provider that we passed into that array, and it's going to create a link with that provider and that resource name.
Oh, I see.
So that's where you're getting this. The weird one is Google Auth too. There's some ways to change that, but you have to mess with all of this. So for now, we're just going to leave it. All right, so now we're going to go to our routes. So on our Devise for users route, we're going to have to change that a little bit because we added that OmniAuth controller. So we're going to tell it that our controllers for OmniAuth callbacks. Now remember that callback links that we used. This is telling it how to handle that or where it is. That's not how you spell that at all. OmniAuth. Unexpected token. Okay. So this is the name of the controller. So if you named your controller something else, OmniAuth, if you named it something different, that's what you would want to put here. This is why naming conventions are nice, because when you're looking through tutorials, you can just put it in. Like you don't have to think about it. So this is the name of the controller that we put all that code in. So whatever you named it, it's what goes here. But we named it OmniAuth, so we're going to call it OmniAuth. All right, so now we're done. We're going to test it real quick so you can see. Finally made it to the end. Let's get our server up. If I didn't break anything, should be good to go. Make sure we can still get into here. Cool. We got our welcome page. So we can go to our user sign up page. Cool. Let's log in with Facebook. There you go. It redirects us to Facebook. We'll tell it it's okay. Log me in. What do we got? Yeah, I figured it might be an issue. Undefined local destroy user sessions path. Or yeah, cool. Did I misspell that? Destroy user. I didn't misspell it. That's what I did. In my welcome. So it tried to get there, right? I just misspelled that. So for error handling, do you see how I figured out what that was? Like, it tells you. I love Rails. Rails just tells you what's wrong.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Before in Ruby, it doesn't tell you what's wrong. Now, unfortunately, with the JavaScript, it goes back to like not telling you what's wrong. But Rails, enjoy it. It's nice. There, so it logged in. That's my email address that we set it. Right, and we can log out. And we can user sign up. Let's do Google. See, Google works. We'll sign in with Google. There it is. So that's my email addresses. So now I'm going to show you something else, though. So in case you're testing this, and this is the thing you're going to run into. Devise automatically checks email addresses for uniqueness, right? So if you're testing it and you're like, okay, well, I just tested those two and they work. Let me go test this other one, GitHub. I use the same email address on Google as I do on GitHub. So when I click on go into GitHub, it's going to ask, yeah, I'm going to get in. It's going to ask me for my password here. It redirects me to the sign up page, which is how we handle the error. Reason is because GitHub sent my email address. Devise checked that email address because I already signed up with Google with that same email address. It kicks it back out because it's checking for uniqueness. That email address already exists in the database. So if you personally like use the same email address for everything, you'll have to like go in and say, so we already logged in. We can sign in with Google again. You can go to like users, edit, and you can cancel your account. So you can cancel each one of them before you test the next one if you have the same email address on each of your social medias.
So I'm sure there's a way where you could. Is there a way that you could, like,
You can go in. I did that myself because I was running into issues. You can go in and tell it to not validate, but that's one of those things where now you're messing with Devise's controllers. And that's super dangerous territory. I might do a study group on breaking Devise on purpose because I learned a lot about what Devise does that way.
That's pretty interesting. So if we were to create a Rails project with Devise and you had a user that wanted to log on with Facebook and then they have the same email they wanted to log on later with GitHub, it would just not work and they wouldn't know why it didn't work.
Well, you can set it up to like in that message handling.
Have some sort of failure, like
have like an alert. Like you can alert that email address already exists. And you can do this. So once you so you know how to access like different parts of a table, right? So like current user.name or whatever.
Yeah.
From like users. So we're going to go in and look at console. All right, we're going to look at all the users. So we have two, my Ninja Like Reflex and Dragon Signs. If you look over here, remember that provider column? Facebook, Google, Oauth. So like say, for example, when I signed in with Google, I could set up a statement, an alert that says when I try to sign in with GitHub, Dragon's Eye images already exists. Looks like you signed in with Google because I could access that provider table. So you could tell them, you could tell your user, hey, maybe you forgot that you already signed up for my website with Google. Try signing in with Google.
Yeah. I have one question. It was in the routes. You wrote the Auth callbacks. What does that mean again? I know you're pointing to the controller, but why do you call it callbacks?
Some of those naming conventions, that's what it expects. So do you remember when we were signing up with Facebook and Google and all of them, we put that callback link? And I explained how it's like your domain /user/auth /Facebook/callbacks. Do you remember that?
Yeah, somewhat.
Yeah, when we were signing up. So let me if I grab one of those links and show you what it looks like. So it looks like that. We had to tell it where the callback is being handled through Google Oauth, and now we're telling Google Oauth that its OmniAuth callbacks are in the OmniAuth controller. So remember on like when Karina was doing it, she changed some stuff in Devise, and so she had to point the change where the controller normally would be to something else.
Yeah, but I saw that she just labeled, or she just had the key registrations, and then it just pointed to registrations, the controller, I guess.
Yeah, so that's what it's doing. So Devise has its own registration controller. So by changing this, you're saying that don't use the default one. Use this other one that I created. Let me see if I can show you. Let's see if I did it here. Yeah, so I'll show you from my project. So I did my controllers. I overrid. So Devise had its own registrations controller. So like she did, I had to do some stuff to override things. So I'm telling it, when you're needing the registrations controller, don't look for where you normally look. Look for my registrations controller. So you can name this whatever. I named it that because that's the name of my controller, registrations controller. If I named it Bob's controller, I could just put Bob's here. All I'm doing is telling it that it has its set of defaults because of Devise.
Oh, so I guess where are we using the OmniAuth callbacks? Like, you know how you're saying to look at OmniAuth, the controller? When are we using OmniAuth callbacks?
That's what all this is. The request environment. This is nothing that like it's happening behind the scenes. It's super abstract.
I see.
It's handling everything. You can actually go in. Your gems are stored locally on your computer. You can actually go into those gems and look at the code. If you want to fall down that rabbit hole, you can.
Okay.
Because all it is Ruby. Every single gem is just Ruby. You can write out everything that OmniAuth and everything that Devise is doing behind the scenes. You can write all that out yourself if you wanted to.
Yeah.
This is just a way for you to not have to do that. It takes care of all of that. Like, you know, in the views that we were looking at for Devise. I'll get my project here. So in those links, you know, this is just Ruby. And all we're doing is, this is a method Devise mapping, but this is just .map. That's all they're doing. They're calling .map on that array that we passed in with OmniAuthable on all those providers that we passed in our model. Models, user model. So all the these, it's just running .map on all of that. And that's where you're getting the names at. So this is just camelizing it, but so it's code that you're used to. It's code that you've seen. It's just happening behind the scenes. And you're going to run that into Rails a lot. Rails does a lot of stuff that you used to have to code yourself just automatically.
Right.
When we did the active record, let's get ready to show you in the actual one. When we did the gem for active record session store, that gives us a lot of methods that we didn't have before. Devise gives us methods, excuse me, that you could write out, but we don't have to now. So like in our views where we did our welcome, the current user, before you would have to write a method, like you'd have to define current user and, tell it how to figure out current user, like find by ID, right? Remember all that?
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
I was
so
just
it's
confused by, yeah.
So it's the same thing. So there's some stuff that like I honestly don't understand exactly how it's happening because it's doing it behind the scenes. Like I know that it's going here and it's getting all that from here, but what it's doing with it back there, I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
That's how I broke Devise, trying to figure that out. I also broke Devise trying to figure out like how to do some custom controller things. And
Oh, I know you generated a controller with your through the terminal. I
Mhm.
forget in the lecture, did you guys say not to do that, or was
No,
or
so she said not to scaffold, so don't do scaffolding. Like those would be what we
okay.
call it, scaffolding, because scaffolding is going to generate a whole bunch of stuff you don't need. Now, what she was talking about not doing it is don't generate a Devise controller.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's
Yeah,
what
that's
okay.
where you'll break it. So you can call like Rails G Devise, right? You can call that, and it'll give you a nice little pretty controller. Everything will be broken
Right.
because like as soon as it happens, Devise goes, oh, you don't want to use my controllers, you want to use your own controllers. Well, okay.
Funny.
And then now you're stuck with these controllers that have a bunch of stuff you don't use. Like one of the things that Devise does that's just really hard to navigate with your own controllers is it takes all your information, brings it into Devise, does stuff to it, all like the validations and the filtering, and like before I said that Devise automatically validates your email, for example. So it does all this stuff to it, and once it's done all that, it spits it back out as a completely different method. Let's see, in views, next HTML. Yeah. So up here, so form for resource. It's not like form for user, it's form for resource. We never made a resource anywhere. There's no resource table, there's no anything. So what Devise is doing is it's taking like your user table, since you generated it as a Devise model, it's taking that in, doing stuff to it, and passing it out as resource.
Right.
So you'll really mess stuff up if you go in there, because the rest of everything that Devise does depends on this resource and depends on the information in it being what it expects it to be.
Yeah. It's just abstracting everything for you.
Yeah. And it gets really confusing, like when stuff starts getting abstracting, like when I was working on, when you get to React, you'll run into that too, because it's JavaScript, but it's super abstract JavaScript. It's handling a lot of stuff for you. So building my React app, there was definitely moments where like things worked and I had no idea why.
Yeah.
Because like I would Google it and it would say just call current user, like Devise tells you call current user. Okay, well, I mean, I understand now like what current user does. I can write my own current user method, but at the time I was like, well, it works. It like does what I want it to do, but I don't know how.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the study group.
No
I appreciate
problem.
it.
I said it went almost 2 hours. Yeah, it's a long one. But I'm gonna like get this uploaded and everything for the link. I appreciate you sticking around, so I wasn't just talking to myself.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
You as well. Bye.
Bye.